Are Android phones really more popular than iPhones? Which brands have a chance of beating Apple and Samsung? And what is the most important feature for most people in a smartphone? These are just some of the questions we asked recently in a survey of 2,000 people in the US. And if you're curious about the answers, watch on, because some of the results were surprising, others were expected but very interesting. So let's waste no time and start right away with what we learned. First, out of 2,000 respondents, can you guess how many people did not own a phone? Take a moment to guess, and the real number is just 1%. That means only 1 people in 100 does not have a phone at all. But if you ask us, even that number seems very high. Well, unless you count for those times you want to do some digital detox maybe. But the big question we wanted to see is, we've been hearing about iPhones just dominating the market in the US. So is that really true? And what about other phone brands? Here's what our survey tells us. 61% of US respondents own and use an iPhone. This is a huge number and it only seems to be growing. And you probably would not be surprised that the biggest competitor to Apple in the US is Samsung, but it only has a share of 24% in our survey, only slightly more than a third of the iPhone market. But what we found even more surprising and interesting is that 3% of people still hold on to an LG phone. At 3% market share, LG still has more market share than Google with their Pixel phones, and remember, LG quit the smartphone market in 2021, more than 2 years ago. So one more surprise for us in this survey was just how people owned and used a Pixel phone or other brands. The share was really tiny. And next up, we asked about how people actually use their phones, and it turns out that on average consumers stick with the same phone for about 25 months, a bit more than 2 years. But did you know there were differences in this number between different groups of people? So for example, iPhone users said they hold on to their phones an average of 21 months, while Android users stick with their phones for an average of 30 months, nearly half as much. And you would think it would be the other way around, considering that iPhones receive software updates for far longer. Now, speaking of the Android versus iOS rivalry, it seems that most people have already kind of made their choice and very few people are willing to switch sides for their next phone. But if there was one feature to make them consider a change, it has to be the single most important feature in the phone. So before we tell you that, actually the second most important feature US users consider is the sheer size of the phone. But the number one most important feature is, well, you probably guessed it, right? Battery life. Now we guess even an unshakable group like iPhone fans might consider switching if the Android world comes up with a phone with breakthrough battery life. Actually, we're not even sure about that one. Our survey shows that new features are what Android users like to talk about in the phone, while Apple users seem to be happy with the features they already have and are more preoccupied with the color options offered on a new device. Talk about different priorities. Next up, we asked about just how much consumers pay for their plans. And can you guess the average cost of a mobile plan per month in the US? Well, this one will probably not be a surprise. The average American pays a whopping $65 each month. Interestingly, there is a big difference in the demographics of each phone carrier too. Believe it or not, T-Mobile is more popular with the younger crowd. AT&T scores very well with city dwellers in their late 20s and 30s, while Verizon is particularly popular with older people living in rural areas. Now, of course, these are just some trends that we saw in our survey, and they don't paint the full picture, but interesting, don't you think? Finally, we asked about the average cost of a smartphone, and it turns out that it is $560, but that is the average for all the users. If you just take iPhone buyers, the average phone price there is much higher at $750. So these are some interesting findings. Which camp do you belong to? Camp Apple or Camp Android? And what is the most annoying thing about the other camp, or what you want to see implemented on your phone? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that we have the full survey with a lot more details and interesting findings over at our website, PhoneArena.com. You'll find the link in the descriptions, and this will do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.